If you've played some Pokémon, you may have noticed that normal-type Pokémon tend to learn a lot of different types of moves. This rat summons blizzards, this bull can channel sunlight, and this kangaroo is the avatar master of all 4 elements. And she can lightning bend, and metal bend. And it goes without saying that just about everyone can learn normal-type moves. That's kind of the point, they're just normal moves. When your assortment of superpowers isn't doing the trick, you can always just ram into someone. Even this little guy can throw a mean punch. But is the normal type truly the most versatile type of all? Can any type meet or even exceed the capacity of normal types to learn many different types of moves? And does any type of move come anywhere close to the widespread distribution of normal type? Let's find out. My name's Elvish, and if you've been on my channel before, you might know me for making music. But I'm also fond of programming and astoundingly useless video game trivia. So today I want to throw the algorithm off my trail and indulge in those other interests by dusting off my Python, poring over some spreadsheets, and addressing that burning question that's kept us all up at night. Which types of Pokémon can learn the most types of moves, and also which types of moves can be learned by the most types of Pokémon? So let's lay down some methodology. First, when I say moves, I'm only going to be looking at damage-dealing attacks. The fact that agility is psychic type might be flavorful, but it does not help you defeat your opponent's poison Pokémon. And what counts as learning a move? For this analysis, I mean that the Pokémon can learn the move by leveling up, breeding, TM, HM, TR, or tutoring in any one of the main series games from Generation 6, 7, and 8. I'm starting with Gen 6 because that's when the Fairy type was introduced, and stopping at Gen 8 because that's what there was in the one easily parsed, readily available dataset I could find online. Huge shoutouts to Vikun. I'll also look separately at the set of only level up and egg moves, which, for lack of a better term, I'll call moves learned naturally. So let's start with the easier question. Which types of moves are most widely distributed? To answer that, I calculated for each type what percentage of Pokémon could learn at least one move of that type despite not being of that type. That caveat ensures that the fact that there are 10 zillion water types doesn't skew the data in favor of water learnability. And thankfully, we're no longer dealing with Gen 1 movesets, so the set of Pokémon who don't learn any same type attacks is comfortably negligible. And it comes as no surprise that normal tops the list, with over 98% of non-normal Pokémon learning a normal type attack. After all, the only Pokémon who don't learn a normal type move are ones with highly abnormal movesets, like the assorted larvae who barely learn anything, the blue punching bags, or whatever this is. But not far behind it comes the dark type, at an impressive 81.38% learnability. In part, that's because unlike scratching or kicking, biting is inherently evil. But it's the versatile utility moves like Thief, Payback, and Assurance that secure Dark's top spot. Below that, there are 5 more types of move which cross the line of available to more Pokémon than not, starting perhaps unsurprisingly by Fighting, followed by Steel, Bug, Ground, and Grass. Scrolling down the list to the 3 most scarcely distributed types, I was surprised to find Water, followed less surprisingly by Dragon, and at the very bottom, Fairy. Though even still, almost 1 in 5 non-Fairy types can learn a Fairy type attack, thanks in large part to Play Rough and Dazzling Gleam. But what if we take TMs out of the equation? Well, the top of our list looks the same, cementing Dark and Fighting up there with Normal as the most widely distributed attacking types. But then, Rock and Psychic jump up to the number 4 and 5 spots, a fact which has less to do with them and more to do with the importance of TMs and tutors for other types. Now, even without being able to teach the extremely learnable Iron Tail, Signal Beam, and numerous ground attacks, Steel, Bug, and Ground hold on to the next 3 spots, but Grass and especially Electric tumble down the list. The rest of the order looks pretty similar, though Poison and Fairy look a bit more learnable, and our new bottom 3 are Fire, Dragon again, and Water at the very bottom. Less than 5% of non-water types learn a water attack naturally, and almost all that do are in one of the water egg groups. So that answers one question. Normal is of course the most learnable type, but Fighting and especially Dark aren't that far behind. Now what about our other question? Which types of Pokémon can learn the most types of moves? That one's going to be a bit trickier to formulate. For one, we can't just compare moveset sizes. Why? Well, imagine there was one type that could always learn the same 6 types of moves, and a second type that learned on average 5, but always a different 5. Well, I would say that this one is more versatile. Or what about this? Less than half of Psychic types can learn Fire moves, whereas over 3/4 can learn Dark moves. But as we've seen, they give out Dark moves practically free of charge, so learning them may not say much about Psychic types. But learning Fire moves is pretty rare, so how do we count this? We've got our work cut out for us. Let's have a stretch, pour yourself your thinking drink of choice, and let's dive in. First, we're going to need a lot of data, like this. This marvelous spreadsheet shows the percentage of Pokémon of each type who can learn at least one damage-dealing move of another type without also being of that type, omitting normal because only weird outliers don't learn normal attacks. Now here too we can see that dark, fighting, and steel moves are very learnable, and water, dragon, and fairy moves are very not. Certain tight correlations also jump out. Of course, water types learn ice moves, but we also see that poison types are particularly likely to learn ghost moves, and if you want to learn a fairy attack despite not being a fairy, your best bet is to be psychic. So this gives us our correlations, but what about cross-correlations? For example, obviously Aurora's learning Blizzard doesn't count toward the versatility of the rock type, but what about Corsola, given that being a water type all but guarantees that a Pokémon can learn an ice move, but most rock types do not? Well, fortunately, it looks like we can ignore this complication. Yes, Corsola probably learns Blizzard because they're a water type, but do rock types have to be part water to learn ice moves? Well, no. Lunatone gets Ice Beam, Aerodactyl gets Ice Fang, and a bunch of the ones with arms can learn Ice Punch. More generally, are there any X-type Pokémon who have to be type Y to learn a move of type Z? Well, the answer is no. Unless you count Genesect, who is the only non-fire bug type to learn a fire move, and Bile-style Oricorio, the only fire type to learn an ice move. Moreover, most type combinations are relatively rare. There are really only 4 that are sufficiently common to merit special attention: normal flying, and to a lesser extent, grass poison, bug poison, and bug flying. So, does flying get a huge boost by being paired so often with a super versatile normal type? It sure doesn't look like it. Normal types are unusually good at learning electric moves, but very few flying types can learn any, and of those who can, not a single one is normal flying. Nor does flying seem to benefit from normal's propensity to learn fighting or ghost attacks. And if it turns out that poison pairings are just slightly bolstering bug and grass somehow, we'll let them have it, because they're going to need all the help they can get anyway. So, how can we determine how versatile each type is? Remember how we noticed that psychic types are unusually likely to learn fire attacks? And we saw that 3/4 of them learn dark attacks, but that's actually below the bar. More than 4/5 of non-dark types can learn dark attacks. Being psychic makes you less likely to learn a dark move. So let's find a way to use information like this. For every type, I'm going to compare the propensity of Pokémon of that type to learn a given type of move to those not of that type. That gives us this lovely table, in which positive numbers in a row mean that Pokémon of the type are more likely than average to learn a given attack type, and negative numbers mean they're less likely than average. Now, we could average across each row to get versatility scores, but I want to use a weighted average so that being good at learning rarely learned types counts a bit more. So, I'll use the type learnability values we found earlier to determine more or less sensible weights to compute our versatility score. Let's do an example. Here's part of the list of percentages of water types who learn each type of move, and here are the percentages for non-water types. We subtract the two for our measure of water's affinity for or against each type. Now we're just going to average these values, but we'll weight the average inversely to each type's learnability. And now taking that average gives water a versatility score of -1.75 points, meaning water types are a bit less likely than your average non-water type to learn various types of moves. Repeating this process for each type will finally give us our results. Now we can say with quite possibly meaningfully mathematical confidence that the most versatile type is the fighting type. Yes, though normal types have inexplicable elemental powers, fighting types can use their fists to do much the same and more, and coupling that with their power to move the earth allows them to secure the top spot over normal by a small but respectable margin. Following not far behind come Dark and Dragon. Scrolling down to the end of the list, we find Flying, Electric, and even by this delightfully abstruse metric, Grass and Bug are at the bottom. Finally, let's take a quick look at natural learn sets. If we perform the same calculation, we see that this time Normal reclaims its spot at the top, with Dragon in second place. Overall, the list looks very similar, with a couple exceptions. Without access to TMs, Fighting takes a big fall, with Ghost dropping quite a bit as well. Water, Poison, and Flying fare a good bit better, and Psychic comes crashing down from near the top to second to last. Psychics may be great at learning from others, but left to their own devices, they pretty much learn psychic moves. In fact, a quarter of them don't even naturally learn a normal attack, a figure exceeded only by ghosts. So there we have it. Before we call it a day, let's just have a bit more fun with our data. Let's summarize what we've learned and put it on this cool chart. When we do, we see a pretty solid correlation. Most types sit somewhere on an axis from what we might call specialist to generalist, where on one side we have types that focus on a small number of things that most Pokémon can't do, and on the other we have types that like to do what lots of other Pokémon can also do, but who also dabble in just about everything else. Except that for some reason it's easier than it should be to learn electric moves, grass and bug types don't learn anything, and dragons are cool. And lastly, maybe you've wondered, are there any Pokémon who can learn at least one attack of every single type? There sure is. It's Mew. A god can do it too, but they need to hold a pink rectangle to cover Fairy. Stepping down to the less exalted beings, there are 3 masterful Pokémon who learn all but one type. Drampa learns all but a poison move, and learning everything except for Fairy are Pangoro and Mother Dunsparce. Well, that's all for me. If you like this sort of thing, let me know, and I'll probably never do anything quite like it again. But engagement might trick YouTube into thinking promoting me would benefit advertisers, and more importantly, sharing and liking and all that is a way of supporting me and folks like me who are trying to make relatively thoughtful nonsense, AI-free art, and passion-fueled projects on the internet. So press the button, sacrifice a digital goat to the algorithm for me, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next thing.